What's good, y'all? Track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to quickly just break down a beat that I made recently, inspired by the Jackboys album by Travis Scott and his label mates. The point was just to try to create something that had that kind of mean, menacing type vibe that was still a little bit simplistic, but that had a little bit more of a melodic type hook. So this is what I came up with. So the full track was actually created starting using pattern 1. The actual guitar that I used is called Ample Guitar, and this is the light version, so this is like the free demo version. I have some paid contact libraries for guitars that I basically just bought off of listening to their demos, and they actually ended up not being that dope or not being that usable. So I went ahead and I downloaded this demo, just kind of check it out before buying the full version. And this is actually really dope. A lot of you guys probably already know about it, but if you're just looking for a nice clean acoustic guitar, this is definitely a dope spot to basically go to. And I left a link for you guys who want it right here in the description as well, so if you want to just click it and download it. But basically I started with this, and I started with this sort of pattern right here. Now that's with the effects applied. Without the actual effects on it, this is what it sounds like, just dry. So obviously it has a lot more of an acoustic type feel without the effects, but let's go ahead and just take a look at the effects that are actually on it real fast. I have a guitar rig with this rotating setting on it, just real quick. You can find this directly in Guitar Rig, didn't really mess with the setting at all. Then I have a parametric EQ cutting a lot of the bottom end and just slightly rolling off the top end as well, just so it's not quite as bright. Then I have a reverb with the venue setting pulled up, so you can find that directly in the actual presets for it. This actually wasn't used. And then I have a isotope vinyl as well, and this was just to make it a little bit grungier and make sure it's not quite as clean. Once I had that, I went up to the pattern quick renderers audio clip. Once I had the audio clip, I just went ahead and I pulled up a FL slicer and imported the audio clip into the FL slicer. I went into the beat section just to chop it by beat. I used normal, and then I just adjusted the in and the fade out, basically the fade in and the fade out, just to make sure there wasn't really a lot of pops in it, and this is what I ended up with. So basically the same pattern, except this little last note was doubled up. And the reason that I actually imported it into here is just you get this kind of little chopped up feeling from SliceX, or from the Fruity Slicer, I should say, that kind of reminds you of a sample a little bit. So I wanted to give it more of like a sampled vintage type vibe. But this is basically the foundation for the actual track. From here, I went ahead and I started layering. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So the next preset I actually layered in here is from our Mirage sound bank for Omnisphere, and this lead is called the LD Business 1. It's just a cassette sample lo-fi type lead, and here's what it sounds like solo. So it's kind of like a sine lead with a little bit of extra grunge to it. And if we take a look at the actual notes from pattern 1, I basically just copied this top end part down and just left out these little kind of bottom bass notes. And then if we actually take a look at the sounds, there's actually some effects on this preset as well. So the very first thing that I have on here is an effect tricks. You want to make sure you set this little timing section to 1/8 and then set the timing section down here to 1/4. And then you can draw in the patterns how you'd like. I just kind of had it do like a little slowdown at the end of each little section. Here's what that sounds like. Then I also just added a quick little reverb. You guys can take a look at the settings right here. And then just a fruity EQ, cut a lot of the bottom end I didn't need, and then just boosted a little bit where the main frequencies are. Just to give the sound a little bit more bite, a little bit more edge. And when you combine those two, this is what you end up with. So that sounded pretty good to me. I wanted to continue adding layers to this. So the next actual instrument that you hear in this track is like this little hit sound, and this is on pattern 14, and basically all it is this little pattern right here. And how I created that was using Massive. There's a preset in Massive called the chord hit slow chords. So I just played a C from this preset, and this is from Night Owl. So I basically just took a C like that, and then I exported it out, quick render as audio clip to have this. And the reason I exported it out is just that I wanted to mess with the length a little bit. So as you can see, I shortened it up just slightly, and then also adjusted the little sample start as well, just give it a little bit of a different timing than what was in the actual VST. But I went ahead and I added that to the track on the 1. At this point, I thought that sounded pretty good, but I wanted to kind of create like a little bit of a lead in for that. So what I did was I took that same pattern and I went ahead and I exported it out again. And for this particular one, what I did was I reversed it and I time stretched it. So a 1 bar to end up with something like that. And then I also put on like a little delay on there, just make it a little bit more suspenseful and make sure it doesn't end right away. But that just kind of helps to build it into the actual hit. So when you combine those two, this is what you end up with. So as you guys can hear, it's pretty simple, but just adds a nice little dimension to the track, a nice little grunge that wasn't there before, and just sounds pretty good in my opinion. After this point, I wanted to go ahead and just start adding my basic kind of drums. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys that. So the drums for this are actually pretty simple. So unless something is kind of unique or weird, I'm going to try to run through this pretty quickly just to not waste too much time on this. The very first thing that I have on here is just a rim shot. It's pretty simple. Just pitched it down a little bit to match the track. After that, I went ahead and I added this little perk, and this is from the Rosaries bonus pack that you get, which includes some percussion and some other little snares and stuff of that nature. And if you take a look at these, they're actually pretty simple as far as what notes they're playing. The only kind of unique thing is that I selected the notes that I actually wanted to play, and then I added a little bit of a flam to them, so you can adjust that how you want it. Just kind of use your ears and find what sounds best for you. You can also go before the note or do things like that if you want to select that. but just kind of use your ears, figure out what sounds good to you. I do this a lot when I have kind of a simplistic type track and I want to just change it up a little bit. It adds just a nice little dimension in there, a nice little kind of complexity that you don't really just get with simple sounds. But when the entire track is actually pretty simple, it helps to stand out a little bit. From there, I went ahead and I started adding my hi-hats. The hi-hats I wanted to keep kind of simplistic like they have in the track, so I didn't really do anything overcrowding, excuse me. I try to keep it pretty simple and open, so as you can tell, it's not really doing too much, and then it has like a little roll at the end where it kind of approaches the one again. From there, I went ahead and I added a second hi-hat. This is just to give it a little bit of an accent piece. Then I went ahead and I added an open hi-hat. The only kind of unique thing about this open hi-hat is that I have it truncated. So you want to click whatever sound you want to truncate. You want to come over here to envelope/instrument settings, and you want to turn all these knobs to the left except the hole to the right. This way the actual sample will just release when you let go of the actual note versus playing the full sample all the way through. And then the other thing that I actually added to that is a phaser. So as you can tell, there's a quick little phaser on here as well, just kind of give it that sound that you hear in the final. Then from there, before the actual 808 and kick, I have one more hi-hat, and it just kind of plays in the spaces between, and it's pitched down a little bit as another little accent piece. And then from there, we basically just have the 808 and the kick. The 808 is pretty simple, as you can tell. The actual notes don't really change a ton. It just kind of follows that little guitar pattern a little bit. Every time I try to make it a little bit too melodic, it kind of took away from the track versus making it better, in my opinion. So I went ahead and I kept it pretty simple. The 808 is also truncated, so same little trick that I showed you guys earlier. Just turn everything to the left, the hole to the right, so it'll cut off when you want it to. But by itself is what it sounds like. So a pretty simple pattern, but it does have some effects on it. So if we take a look at that quickly, we have a parametric EQ on here, cutting a lot of the kind of top end from it. And then I have a fruity fast distort, but I went ahead and I turned it down to about 40% just to give the 808 a little bit more kind of bite in the track. I felt like it was sounding a little bit too toned down without that. And without that, this is what it sounds like. So that didn't sound bad to me, but I thought this just made it blend into the actual tone of the track a lot better. And then from there, I went ahead and I just added a punchy kick. So I basically followed the same pattern as the 808, just removed, I believe, just one of the notes so that they're not just playing in step the whole track. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and jump into the second section where the verse slightly changes up. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I did for this part. So at this point, I wanted to go ahead and just switch up the actual verse for the second part. So what I did was I took this little drum track that I had right here, and I just basically sliced the first part off. And then I just went ahead, selected it, the little parts I didn't want to use, and then just deleted them out of the track. Once I did that, I basically had like this little opening at the front of the actual verse, and here's what it sounds like. So So that sounded pretty good, but I felt like I could add some into that open space to make it a little bit more unique. So I found this preset in the actual Mirage preset bank that I told you guys earlier for Omnisphere, and the actual preset is called the Celeste Downstrom or Celeste Downstrom. But here's what it sounds like by itself. So it's just a nice way to complement pretty much any track using just the root note. And I basically just add that on the one. So here's what that sounds like. So that sounded pretty good to me, but I wanted to just make it slightly more dramatic, slightly more cinematic. So I added these explosive hits from Massive again. And this is from our Night Owl preset bank, but by itself, this is what it sounds like. And I just EQ'd it to get a little of the bottom end out just so it wouldn't interfere with my bass. But when you combine that with the downstrum and the little gap, this is what you end up with. So that sounded pretty good to me. From there, I basically just added a quick little, kind of like a little vocal sample chop. And this is from the Sermon drum kit. I just found a little chop in there that I wanted to use. And I just felt like it added a cool little vibe and energy to the track. So I used it basically right here before the actual one hits twice. So here's what it sounds like. And then from there, it's basically going to transition into the hook. So the only other thing that I want to cover quickly is just this little reverse crash. You can pretty much make this with any crash you want. Just use like a simple 808 type crash. But basically, you want to load in your crash, reverse it, set your timing, with which for me, was 1 bar, set to generic. So it's not going to actually change the pitch of the sound. And then basically just reverse it to get something like that. And what I like to do is I like to add a delay on the end as well, just so it doesn't cut off kind of dry right there at the end, and there's like a little bit of a tail end, which also kind of helps with that creepy type vibe. In my opinion, it kind of reminds me of like horror movies or that horror genre. But anyway, once you add that as the transition piece, you basically just end up with something like this. And from there, it kind of falls into the hook section. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys how the actual hook was built. So one thing, if you kind of pay attention, there's basically a parametric EQ, and this is just used as like a low pass filter on the little guitar section, so on these low parts. But for the actual hook, or the first part of the hook, I wanted that low pass filter to play first, and then I wanted to layer like a higher end ARP on top of it, but I didn't really want them to kind of compete for space. So that's why you see the low pass filter on the actual guitar sound. But the actual guitar sound for the hook actually changes a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and just take a look at that quickly. It's the same preset from earlier, same exact effects. The only difference is that I actually changed the notes that it's playing. So right now it's playing something like this. So still sounds pretty similar, but just had some extra notes to make it a little bit busier. From there, I went ahead and I went through the same process. I went ahead and I exported it out. Then I added it to the actual slicer again, and then just chopped it. The only difference was this time I didn't really do like the double up note at the end. So it just kind of plays all the way straight through. But the actual pattern, once you add it to the slicer, sounds like this. And that's what the low pass applied. And there's actually a chance that I kept this in the whole time I was kind of previewing the beat. So if you guys were hearing some distortion or anything, that was probably just because I had the guitar basically two parts playing for the guitar and the slice deck. So I went ahead and turned that off now, so hopefully it's not an issue. But basically that's the little hook section. You get the little low pass and you get that little guitar section. So it goes from here to this. So that sounded pretty cool to me, but I kept like kind of hearing and picturing these kind of deep bass lines, kind of similar to Mike Dean. So what I did was I went into actually, I think it was Massive and not Omnisphere. Yeah, so both of these are from Massive, from the Night Owl Bank, the Detune Sub 1. And then this one is actually a lead, the Overdrive 2. And I went ahead and I combined them to end up with something like this. I thought that would be a cool way, just kind of switch it up. So when you combine those two, this is what you end up with. To me, that sounded pretty good, but there was still other elements that I felt like it was just kind of missing in there. So the very first thing that I did was I copied this exact same guitar pattern, this little section, down into the same exact lead that we used earlier from the Mirage Sound Bank. So the LD Business 1 again, and by itself is what it sounds like. And it basically just repeats from there, and it has that Effectrix and the other effects that the lead had earlier as well. And basically when you combine those two, you start to get some a little bit more melodic. So that sounded pretty good to me, but I still just wanted one little kind of final piece to it. So I was kind of looking through different ARPs and trying to find something that kind of fit. And the homie Ocean View actually is one of my favorite people that just makes ARPs in general. He's just really dope at finding stuff that kind of fits grooves and is still a little bit unique. So I found this preset in his Embark XP that just dropped recently. It's called the Know Your Purpose ARP. And here's what it sounds like solo. And if you take a listen to that, there's some effects on that as well. There's a left to right kind of pancake VST just to make it a little bit bigger and make the actual hook seem a little bit wider in the stereo field. And then from there, I also have a momentary setting from the actual gross beat with just the half speed. You guys all know how to do that. And then I also just have a quick little EQ, cutting a lot of the bottom end and just boosting slightly, I guess in the mids, the high mids in a way, just to bring it out slightly more. And with the actual track, this is what it ends up sounding like. And then from there, it transitions into the B section of the hook. So the B section of the hook basically just kind of repeats a lot of the same stuff. You get the same exact drums. The 808 comes back in. We drop out this little bass section. And then the only other thing that kind of plays over here that's a little bit different is that we actually keep the ARP in for the hook. So you kind of have the more chill kind of version of the hook where maybe somebody could do some singing. And then the second part comes in where it has a little bit more energy. And then from there, it transitions back to the verse section. As you guys can tell, I kept everything pretty short as far as the layout of the track is. Whenever I'm kind of doing Kanye or even Travis Scott or kind of good music inspired stuff, I really try not to pay attention to rules as much, just because a lot of their stuff is so unorthodox, whether it's adding, whole beat switches, or the song might be a little bit shorter with like a crazy Mike Dean intro and outro and stuff like that. So I didn't really kind of pay attention too much to the actual formatting of the beat. But obviously you can make it 12 bar verses, you can make it 16 bar verses, whatever you want to do. But this pretty much covers the full making of this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm trying to drop one video every Wednesday, so please make sure you leave a like and a comment if you actually enjoy these kind of videos. My name is Track Kennedy. Until next time, studiosounds.com.